When people visit from outside of India, especially the US, and come to India and look at where the startup ecosystem is today, they can't believe the fact that this ecosystem actually started forming only about 10 years ago in earnest. There were other startups that happened around 2000, and then there was another wave around 2006. But when the government of India took the stance of wanting to take an active role in 2015, 2016 timeframe, it only looked like it's not necessary at the moment because there was organic growth already. And this was something that Startup India, Stand Up India, which is what Prime Minister Modi announced. And he said one thing very interesting. I was there at that time. He said, we are doing this on a Friday evening. All the bureaucrats have started going home already. And there is not much of intervention. We can actually get started on this movement. And he felt that government being a part of this is something that is necessary, but at the same time wasn't sure how it's going to all work out. And in fact, it has proven to be a huge success with the fact that there are so many things that have been put together with the central government taking active interest, and with the central government, the state governments also, vying with each other to build very, very vibrant startup ecosystems within their states. So it's been a very interesting journey so far over the last 10 years. But at the same time, you see that folks that come from the valley will be very vehement about government not necessarily taking any active role in building the ecosystem. Why should they do that? This is supposed to be happening organically. But the important point is, this was actually the case that happened in the US, in Silicon Valley for that matter, long time ago. And the people that have come now to build startups in the startup ecosystem have actually forgotten that there was some intervention, there was some help that was coming from DARPA, from NASA and various other organizations in bringing technologies to the markets and so on and so forth. So there's been a lot of that has happened, and that is now in the past, and therefore what they see is very different. Similarly, in Israel, there has been Yozma and various other initiatives that have been taken up by the government, and now they don't need to be as actively involved anymore. So that's what we thought we should be talking about. We are at a very nice juncture in our India journey. We have Mr. Ramesh Abhishek, who's the person who architected a lot of the policies that came across after the Startup India, Stand Up India. He took over on March 1st of 2016, sir. Yes. And then he worked through those things. So we'll have a few questions for him. And we also have Mr. B.V. Naidu from Karnataka. He is the chairman of Karnataka Digital Economy Mission. Very unique initiative that is not just looking at Bangalore, but also beyond Bangalore. What are the initiatives that are being put together so that digitally and innovatively, Karnataka as a state can grow much faster. And then my successor at T-Hub, M. Srinivas Rao, he's managing the largest innovation campus in the world, I guess, right, MSR?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So his and Telangana has taken a different route of building a startup ecosystem, but at the same time, it's a body that is both public and private. Is a public-private partnership. So we will listen to hear about how each one of them are approaching building these startup ecosystems in the state. So I'll start with Mr. Abhishek. Sir, when you took over, why did you, how did you approach this? Government doing this in the first place, you had spoken about how to define startups, starting from such fundamental issues of defining that to actually making this a priority. And what were the priorities that you took on? Because this was something that was pretty much a new area for government to take a very active interest in.
Thank you, Ravi. Hello, everyone. When this Startup Action Plan was launched by our Prime Minister in January 2016, and I joined in March, so for us also, we were also like a startup, trying to learn, trying to do something innovative within the government. So our biggest learning came from our very frequent interactions with the startups, with the venture funds, and various parts of the ecosystem. We learned from them, and then we implemented programs, came out with policies, and a lot of other initiatives were taken. For example, one of the things that we did was to set up a fund of funds of 10,000 crore rupees. And we changed the guidelines of that fund after talking to people working on that field. And in 3.5 years, I remember, we actually committed almost 3,500 crores to 45 plus AIFs. And that was a big source of funding and good kickstart. We interacted with a lot of players to understand the change in regulations and tax policy that was required, whether it was angel tax or the problems of venture funds. So we found out, we worked with them, we worked with the concerned departments in the governments, we talked to the regulators, and we have actually managed to change more than 30 regulations and tax policies in the government. It took time because most of these need some engagement. Our experience was that you need to get the attention of all the regulators and the policymakers and departments over a period of time. They need to listen to people who are affected, and people who are affected need to listen to them and have a good exchange of ideas and thoughts. So we could do many of those changes as well. Similarly, on IPRs, we found that this patents was taking such a long time in our country. While we were improving that, we made a fast track for startups who applied for patents. And actually, we could give patents in about 1 year time, though normal queue was like 7 to 8 years. So we learned a lot. We also roped in states and other government departments and PSUs by encouraging them. So it was basically a huge movement that got started. And also public procurement. By that time, this our government e-marketplace, GEM, had come about. So we integrated the backends of Startup India, those who are registering with us, with the GEM platform, so that the advantages of no need for earnest money, prior experience, no turnover requirement, all that got integrated with the GEM in the government. So many of these initiatives came over a period of time, but there was a big, lot of involvement of everybody because there was political commitment. The message had come from the Prime Minister himself that we want to support startups, and that actually got us the support of all the departments and regulators. But our constant interaction with the startups, attending their events, going out to them, understanding from them, and consulting them, and then talking to the departments, I think this two-way process was very helpful for us in making these changes that we did.
Thank you, Rameshji. So one of the things that Mr. Abhishek also did was there was the state startup ranking, which started ranking the states on their innovation capabilities and how they were actually building the startup ecosystem directly through funding, through policies, through procurement, and various other capacity building measures. So that actually started a very interesting set of competition between states. And that definitely created that hunger to do better and do more. And several states had actually benefited from having these kinds of competitive spirit imbued in them. So one of the states that is on top of the list is Karnataka. And BV, we would like to hear from you. KDM has come into the picture in the recent, 1.5 years, 2 years?
1.5 years, yeah.
1.5 years. And in a very short period of time, not only has it taken a very active interest in building the startup ecosystem to the next level, not that it's not already there in Bangalore and other cities, but it has actually done much more than that for Bangalore and the other cities, and at the same time also taken other sectors into account as well. So what's the vision behind KDM, and how are you looking to build this out?
Yeah, before I talk about the KEDAM, the couple of things that what changed the Karnataka to be the highest in the map in terms of the startup ecosystem, as well as the IT, etc. So, like you mentioned, Ravi, even though the U.S. entrepreneurs felt that government should not play an active role, but in the Indian scenario, government needs to play a role, and it played a right role as a catalyst, as an initiator, facilitator and initiator. That has helped a lot. If you look back last 20 years, one of the things what we consistently followed in Karnataka, whatever initiative that Karnataka has done, it's always driven by that industry, for that industry. That made the difference. Because this is what we are trying to do is building an ecosystem. It's not that only government can do, it's not that only industry, or not that only VCs can do. It is an industry, academia, and the government should collaborate and make sure that the ecosystem. That is what has happened in Karnataka. The few things, number one, Karnataka is the one which has started way back 20 years back, a Karnataka-focused IT fund, Kitwen Fund, which no other state done that. That has created an impact. Likewise, there are many initiatives that are done. I just mentioned that because that's related to startups. And the last 4 years, Karnataka has run this new program called the Elevate program, one of the most successful programs in the country, and which has actually spent around 164 crores of money as a grant to successful entrepreneurs through the Elevate, and there are 475 companies have been shortlisted. That good part of the story is 35% of those startups have come not from Bangalore, they're from other than Bangalore, beyond Bangalore. We call them as a beyond Bangalore cluster. That is second impact that has happened. The third is, 30% of these entrepreneurs are also women-driven entrepreneurs. That made the difference. So we did some of these things, and then we also need a innovation network, right? The network of the accelerators, network of the incubators. Then we created one of the accelerator network in Karnataka, which will bringing the COEs, the government-funded Center of Excellences. There are 8 excellent COEs and around 9 incubators in the state. All of them brought into this network so that they facilitate. In this journey, and we did an experiment 1.5 years back, that is what a creation of the Karnataka Digital Economy Mission, with a 51% taking the skew from the Invest India. A 51% is held by the industry associations like, NASCOM, IES, and ASSOCHAM, and 49% with the government. And most importantly, the chair of the position, first time anywhere in the country that has happened, that has given to a non-government a person. So I got that opportunity to chair that. Last 1.5 years, I'm chairing that. We have an excellent team of 18, 19 professionals, and they take a mandate. Number one is continue to grow what we are growing in IT, in the electronics, etc., but also focus on the startups. And the startups, so this organization, in fact, you must have noticed that, the DPIT ranking last year, we actually one position gone up. That has primarily gone up because of the professionals from the KDM started working with the state government to improve upon those parameters. That has happened. Then number 2, we are creating what we did for IT in Karnataka. We are creating a cluster focus funds, one in Mysore, Mangalore, and Hubli. Number 3, we identified a startup grid among these clusters and identified 450 companies coming from these clusters, and we are facilitating them. Number 1, what do they need? They need the money, they need the market access, right? So we created the programs both for this money, availability of the money, not just from the state government grants, but also from the Startup India seed funds and Samruddha Fund, Mighty, and a few of the seed funds, and also Bangalore has the traditionally large fund network, right? They're all been helpful. What I felt very nice today when I walked in here, two of the companies shortlisted in these awards here is one company from Mysore and one company from Hubli, which people never talked about these things. So the key message what I'm giving Ravi here is, number one, you need to have if you want to create an ecosystem, you need to have an industry, government and academia should come together, and this has to be an initiative by industry for that industry. The policies in Karnataka are created not by the government, it's the industry decides what policy is needed and that gets implemented. And then implementation, thanks to the KDM, now KDM is supporting the government for the implementation also. And most of the policies, the good policies, need a implementation framework. Otherwise, the policies, however beautiful they may be, if you do not have a proper implementation framework, they would not succeed. So that's what we try to address in this KDM, and I must tell you that it's exceedingly working very well. Thank you.
Great, BB. So, that with a start which was already at a successful momentum to actually taking it to the next level is what Karnataka is aspiring to do. With that, I will also take the cue from BV saying, okay, although MSR represents T-Hub primarily, but there is a broader vision that Telangana has with several organizations that are doing various different things in a very specialized way. And T-Hub happens to be the one that, is at the center of all this. So how does Telangana, envision, building this ecosystem to the next level?
Thanks, Ravi. So I'll just build on what you said. So I think, Telangana, as we all know, right, the 29th state of the union, it's the youngest state in the union, it's about 8 years old. And obviously, Telangana has built on the work done in the past, by various governments. So there's been a continuity of policy, there's been a continuity of support to build the entrepreneurial ecosystem. But quickly getting into what Telangana has built from a innovation network perspective, and as we all know, right, Hyderabad is a city of pearls, and there's actually a string of pearls which have been put together to further spur and grow the innovation network. So obviously the most well-known of them is T-Hub, and T-Hub, of course, our focus is obviously early stage entrepreneurship, idea to typically a pre-series A kind of round. And so far, we've, in the last 7 years, since inception, supported about 1,100 plus entrepreneurs across close to 50 plus different sectors. So that's T-Hub. The other ecosystem, which is probably not as widely known, right, are, for example, how do we democratize entrepreneurship? How do we spur innovation, not just tech-heavy, urban-centric innovation? So there's an entity called TSIC, Telangana State Innovation Cell. And I think, Ravi, you were also the CIO for that for some time. So essentially it's about how do you, across the 33 districts of Telangana, how do you spur, for example, impact innovation, grassroots level innovation in areas around agri, health, education, and so on. So that's the second entity. The third entity is India's first state government-led incubator for women. As we all know, the percentage of women as entrepreneurs is only about 11%. It has come significantly lower than it should be. So we have an entity called VHub, which is supporting and driving women-led entrepreneurship, both tech and non-tech. The fourth entity is an entity called T-Works. This is essentially about prototyping, what we call a maker's lab. So essentially, for example, if you are building, we are still a largely services, software, platform-based economy, but I think the recent events, the geopolitical issues, the pandemic, etc., are going to drive this focus on, Atmanirbhar, and clearly hardware is something which we have to build on. So T-Works is essentially about hardware prototyping. So you could basically, so there are CNC equipment, there is 3D printing equipment, a 12-layer PCB lab, and it's basically a maker's garage. So for example, Skyroot, which most of us would know about, launched the first private player which launched on the 18th of November. A lot of their initial prototyping was done at T-Works. So that's the fourth entity apart from T-Hub, TSIC, and V-Hub. We also have another entity which is about how do you bridge the gap between industry and academia from a skill standpoint, and also inculcate the entrepreneurial mindset in young people. So we have an entity called Task, which is now present in about 700 colleges and works with 55 plus corporates to make young people job ready and ensure the reduction of time for people to get this thing. So we also have one more piece, which is how does government leverage all the innovation being done by early stage innovators and entrepreneurs. So we have an entity called ET, Emerging Technologies. Now, just to give you two use cases. So for example, we have a lot of startups doing very interesting work in the blockchain space. So for example, chit funds, which is a heavily regulated industry. So one of our startups has been working with the revenue department and has built a blockchain platform. Another startup, again, using blockchain for vaccine traceability, which was put to good use during the pandemic. Several drone startups, which are working with the government in areas like agri, for spraying, forestation, and so on. So the role of emerging technologies is to, first of all, engage with various government departments. So, for example, last year with about 287 officers of director and above in the government, they did sensitization sessions. Actually about a month ago, November 1st, we had 40 officers of, secretary rank, the government of Telangana, who came in and spent a full day to understand what's happening, in the startup ecosystem, right? And to see how they could potentially leverage it for the work of the government, right? So broadly, we have all these entities: T-Hub, T-Works, V-Hub, TSIC, Emerging Technologies, Task. We also have a center for additive manufacturing, which has been set up. So these are all investments which have been made by the government. They've also been structured in a unique way, which is basically as public-private partnerships, Section 8 companies,
Right.
and bring in people from the private sector to actually run them.
So let me ask you, now that so much has been put together, all the different agencies, what are the ways in which the government itself procures from startups? Because that's something that the government talks about, wants to be innovative, wants to say that they are the first place that the government would procure from startups. How is that working out?
That's working out really well. So a couple of things they've done, I think, building on some of the work done at the center. So basically governments can now procure on a bilateral basis without going through tendering, net worth, revenue, balance sheet size criteria, where there's a GO which has actually been issued by the government. So for example, just a very recent example, one of our startups is doing some really interesting work in building digital health record system. So they are now directly engaged with the healthcare department to digitize the PHCs, right, using that platform on a bilateral basis without tendering.
Great. Sir, when you were working on these things, I attended one of the meetings where you had folks from, I think, the Reserve Bank of India, you had people from SIDBI and various other organizations. So sometimes when you're working on creating easier pathways, ease of doing business, and so on and so forth, it necessarily does not mean that one organization has to change. There is a dialogue between the different people. There are different kinds of conversations that need to be facilitated so that some kind of a clarity and then therefore an articulation of a new policy can be done. So how did you work with various departments to make this thing happen at your role as the Secretary of DPIIT?
Ravi, actually we were working on a mission mode, and we knew that unless we handle all these problems, which is the responsibility of multiple agencies within the government and also among regulators, the relief and support to the ecosystem will not come. And we've also found that there are people in the other departments and regulators who are quite sensitive. They could see the need for making changes, and if not change for everyone, at least make a carve out change for startups, because their needs and their issues and challenges were very different. But it just needed to have their attention and time. I think I find that whenever bureaucrats and regulators spend time with stakeholders, try to understand from them what needs to be done, and they try to jointly work on a solution, things do get done. The problem is the lack of dialogue, lack of communication. So what happens typically is that people write to the government or regulators, and there is not much response because people are kind of, stuck on their whatever position they may have had for a good legacy regions. So we facilitate the dialogue, and we thought that this continuous interaction was required, because one meeting sometimes doesn't help, two meetings don't help, but you need to kind of persevere. So while even pushing it within the government on ease of doing business, despite the support of the highest political leadership, it took quite some time. So I think that that kind of business-friendly attitude needs to be developed all across the government machinery, and the continuous forum should be there for dialogue, and I think that is the best way to get things done.
So BV, Karnataka has always been on at the leading front in building, the startup ecosystem. There was the talent that was already available, technology talent because of the services companies. There was also some ideas that these people would come up on and therefore start working outside of these larger companies and begin that journey. So I saw back in 2006. So what are the other areas in which that, there was that natural confluence of things that came together to make Karnataka what it is today?
See, first of all, for any entrepreneurship, you need to have a large ecosystem that has already been created through the services industry in Bangalore. That has really helped a lot, because these are the people who have been working with other companies. They wanted to become an entrepreneurs. They came out and started an entrepreneurship. That's number one. Number two, if you look at in the technology cluster, for example, the deep tech companies across the country, if you find most of them are in Bangalore because of the huge deep tech industry that is there, whether it is in terms of the chip design companies or aerospace companies or in the fintech high-end companies. That is also helped a lot. Third is whatever the little facilitation that is done by the government, and it has come in hand in hand. The third thing is Bangalore, as I told you, it is always an approach is by the industry for that industry. There are 3 vision groups which are headed by the industry. A vision group on the startup, and a vision group on IT, vision group on BT, and of course right now the KDM. All these organizations are chaired by the industry personnel. That made the difference. So as and when there is a need, the policy is created and support is been provided to an entrepreneur. The fourth is, if you really look at this, a good entrepreneur, unless he is very bad, he will find a means of a support at various levels, right from the incubators level to the seed level to the pre-series A and above series A. All that funds access that is available. Recently, we also worked with these bankers, right? There's a beautiful scheme called CGT MSc scheme, which has not been very successful, for many years, because bankers, even though the government is guaranteeing, they don't want to give the 2 crores loan to an entrepreneur. So we talked to all the bankers. We told them, if a alternate investment fund put in the money, what is the problem for a banker to put the money? So they agreed, and they're changing the certain policies. In fact, they increased the 2 crores to the 10 crores. So thereby, if a successful entrepreneur is in the right hands, a reasonably good entrepreneur in the right hands, he can become successful much fast in Bangalore, and the ecosystem provides that kind of a support.
Yeah. Thanks, PV. So, you may be wondering, in the Thai forum, we are talking about this. Thai obviously is very, very interested in facilitating development of startup ecosystem in India quickly. We have 24 chapters in India, Thai chapters, and these are places from which a lot of thought leadership and other capabilities emerge because the charter members and others are already there in those states, being able to make these kinds of things happen. Also, we took a conscious approach this year to look at actually helping with the capacity building, policy making, and various other things. And with the help of Mr. Ramesh Abhishek, we worked with several states and central government to make that happen. So we are very happy to note that what was previously looked upon as a place where the governments would actually look for a CII or a FICCI to actually come and do their startup kind of events or programs and so on and so forth. They actually are looking at now TAI as an organization that can help with those activities. So a lot of things that we think we can naturally bring to building of the startup ecosystem and helping government and making them successful is definitely one of the highest priorities that developed this year, and we continue to want to take that forward. So with that, I will like to bring end to the session. Thank you very much to all the panelists. Thank you very much for sharing the insights and and the wisdom from all these years. Thank you.